coming back to excitotoxins, in your book, it mentions that the amount of MSG and similar additives have doubled in every decade since the 1940s. By 1972, 262,000 metric tons of MSG were produced, and many cookbooks recommended adding MSG to their recipes, especially for soups and sauce, like you mentioned. I didn't even know that MSG was ever a purchasable retail item, but you also say that it's been recently disclosed that excitotoxins are being added to smoking tobacco. So if that wasn't addictive enough, here's another layer of addiction. And it just seems like the evidence is quite clear of the damage it does to the body. The only thing it does is taste good. Well, that means we are a nation of addicts. And I looked up Ajinomoto, the company who produces most of the world's supply of MSG, and their stock price has never been higher than it has been in 2023. And that is really sad. That's a demoralizing sign to see, given all the data that's out there now.
Well, when my book first came out, I got invited to Chicago to lecture. And so there were, several hundred people there. And they had the major newspapers in Chicago sent representatives, reporters to listen. And while I was waiting to speak, I got to speak to the man who worked primarily for processed companies to put MSG in. And he talked to me privately. He says, I'm the one that puts it in the food. And he said, I don't care what you say. We're going to change the name and figure a way to get it in the food. He told me that. And I said, well, I thank you for telling me that, because I'm going to tell every audience from now on. And I did. I lectured on that. I told the audience exactly what he said. And the reporter that was from the Chicago Tribune was sitting in the audience. He heard my talk, and then he wrote an article that was critical. I wrote him a personal letter. I said, you sat in a lecture, you heard the science, and you're going to live for what you've done.
Yeah, they don't care. They don't care. And
Yeah.
let's drill down on the hide and seek game of the naming and the marketing a little bit more, because people might think, well, I know MSG is bad, and they might remember a dust up a few years ago, and they might assume, well, we learned it was bad and it was removed from the food supply. And obviously we have aspartame, which is very much in the food supply. But you say in the book that you could buy products that say right on them, no MSG, and yet it's in there. Or they'll have labels like 100% natural sweeteners, and it will be aspartame. Is there more to say about the coded language they're using and how we can avoid it? Because we know it's bad, but we are being lied to on the packaging. I guess you should avoid anything that's in a package like that. But what other types of tricks are they using to get people who know it's bad to still buy it and ingest it?
Well, it's like the guy at the meeting told me, we're going to figure a way to get it in the food. And what they did is they changed the name. And the law says that if you don't add 100% MSG to the food, you don't have to put it on the label. So if you have an ingredient that has 100% MSG, you can put it in the food and not put it on the label. That's in the law. And so what they did other than that is to use products they knew had high glutamate in it. For instance, you see natural flavors. A lot of those natural flavors have very high glutamate concentrations in them. You see soy protein extract, that's glutamate. You see autolyzed yeast is very common. And autolyzed yeast is you extract the glutamate. So you see all of these names, and it's a very long list. Adrienne Samuels was an expert in that area. I met her, and she showed me all the names that they change, that they create. And so she's written a number of articles about these names. So they disguise the names. And people look at the package and say, well, there's no MSG in it. It just has soy protein extract, has oilized yeast, has carrageenan, and it's okay. No, it ain't. That's an extract that purposely concentrates the glutamate. And what we found since then is that almost all tumors have glutamate receptors, and they grow much faster and spread much faster in the face of glutamate. So if you have cancer and you've got your cancer under control and you eat a diet high in glutamate, it's going to spread. It's going to grow much faster. And I've written a couple of articles on that. It makes cancer grow. And so what the smart people said, well, why don't we block the glutamate receptor? Well, they block the glutamate receptors and add it to the traditional treatments, and the tumors respond a lot better. So here are people with cancer out there eating this food filled with glutamate, and their cancer's uncontrollable, and they're dying from cancer because they're eating what I always call as a cancer fertilizer.
Oh.
You're fertilizing your cancer by eating this processed food.
Wow. It's funny how eye-opening a changing of the terms can be. And I like the term cancer fertilizer. And aspartame itself has an interesting story I wanted to fit in here, made by a company named Cyril. And aspartame was approved in 1974, but then pulled by the FDA in 1975 because the animal studies were so damning. Then in 1980, Ronald Reagan was elected, and Donald Rumsfeld was CEO of Cyril from 77 to 85, and used his sway in government to get it reapproved for dry goods by the FDA under the new head, Arthur Hayes Jr. Well, Del Bigtree said it was one of the first things that Hayes did in his new position, and within 2 years, he was under investigation by Congress for taking money from outside companies, so he resigned. But the last thing he did on his way out the door was approve aspartame for beverages. So that is the rough history of aspartame, one of the worst additives ever put in the American food supply, and it barely made it in. There was a big investigation, it was banned, and then came back out. And when you think about the damage that it's done and how close it was to not being in our food supply, man, we took the wrong road there.
Well, there's a cancer expert named Razzini, and he's from Italy. He is the number one person to study the cause of cancer and all these things, all foods and all natural products, pesticides, herbicides. He studies them. He did a study on aspartame, and he found that it increased the incidence of lymphoma, which was one of the fastest growing cancers we see in humans. And it increased slightly brain tumors, and it increased breast cancers. So immediately our FDA said, oh, well, it's not a good study. So he did a lifetime study, a 2-year study of animals. That's their lifetime. And he confirmed exactly what he found. He did a huge number of animals. And I predicted, I said, now when that gets to the United States, they're going to cover it up. That's exactly what they did. Well, that's a lifetime study. Well, that's what humans do. They start as children. The whole life they're consuming aspartame. And it's just like the Razzini study. And they're getting breast cancer, they're getting pancreatic cancer, they're getting lung cancer, they're getting all these cancers, and it's stimulating the growth of that cancer. And they just keep drinking it. The sodas is the number one source of aspartame. Right. That's exactly what he approved on his way out, is the sodas.
Yeah.
You see?
And you mentioned seeing little kids, toddlers getting a sip of diet soda, which is just mind-boggling to me. But it doesn't even have to be kids drinking adult beverages. This stuff, MSG in particular, a lot of these excitotoxins, they're put right in baby food, right?
Well, they did it first. And Dr. Olney, who I knew personally, I stayed at his house and I visited his laboratory, is that he testified before Congress about the brain damaging effect of it in baby food. Well, Congress didn't have the courage to withdraw it, but the companies knew the publicity so bad, so they said, well, we won't put it in baby food anymore. They put it in adolescent food, just a little bit older. Your brain really doesn't finish developing fully until age 27. They knew that. So here you got adolescents who are consuming food for adolescent little kids, 2 and 1 years old, have aspartame in it and have MSG in it and have a number of excitotoxins in it. And the mother doesn't know any difference. And that kid ends up having wrong. Well, look, my kid's fat. Well, look, my kid has a cancer. Well, look, my kid has one of these other complications from consuming this type of excitotoxin. You see, and Congress okayed that. The food processing companies encourage it. I mean, you look at some of these foods, it's just encouraging. It's sweetened with an artificial sweetener. In other words, it'll keep your kid from getting fat. Why are kids fat? They say, well, the growth of obesity is mostly in these young children. Why are they growing fat? They weren't fat in my age. They weren't fat all this time. And suddenly out of the blue, they're fat. Well, isn't that ironic that it's the same time you started putting this stuff in food? And like I said, it doubles every 10 years. And so now kids are fatter than ever. And they say, well, they don't eat any more than I did when I was a kid. Well, they're now getting excitotoxin.
Right. It's a really troubling situation. And I have a toddler and another one on the way. So I'm always thinking about trying to keep all the poisons in the world at bay. And it probably drives my wife crazy how many rules I try to put on us. And because there's just so many things in society that are toxic. I always tell her, hey, it's not my fault. Let's not use plastic. Let's not use aluminum, and let's not eat any of this processed food. But to be fair, like, I'm 38 years old and I probably ate as much from a drive-through as anyone could between the ages of 18 and 28. Soda with every fast food combo, as you know, and I feel obviously okay. Maybe I just dodged a bunch of bullets, but when you read the book, it's like when you say things like a kid can get a brain lesion after just one dose of a certain concentration. I mean, this is really scary stuff. Is it reversible in any way? Has this stuff built up in my body that even if I stop now, I should expect dementia or cancer by 50? What do you tell people who went through a decade of eating trash and didn't really know these things until later?
Well, a lot of people in that category. And what we find is there's a great number of natural products that do protect. And in fact, there's a number of natural products that protect against the effect of these excitotoxins. And that's primarily what I've been concentrating on is what can you do both to stop it and to reverse it? And what we find is a great number of plant extracts that do exactly that. So yeah. And so the government is now bending over backwards to outlaw the supplements. Yeah, and I belong to another group, and that's what we do. We're trying to protect the supplements against the governments, but all the governments of the world, particularly UN, is doing everything in its power to make sure you can't get these. And again, it goes back to population control. Well, they want people to die in middle age. If you live in an old age, you're going to be on Medicare. You're going to be on supplement programs. You're going to have cost the government a lot of money. But if you die at mid-age, you don't cost the government any money. Dead people don't cost the government money.
Right.
And like I always tell people, I say there's 2 ways to solve poverty, or maybe more, but at least 2 ways. One, you teach these people how to earn a living and sacrifice and do things right and have a good life. Or you can kill them off. Both of them reduce poverty.
Yeah.
Which one do you want? Do you want to reduce the number of poor people by killing them, or you want to just teach them how to? It's like the old Chinese proverb about teaching a person to fish. You either give them a fish or you can teach them how to fish.
Can you believe it, people? A video clip and a peek into how that sweet THC sausage is made. For some people, I'm sure it's nice to put a face to the name, so I started making clips that are a little more YouTube friendly than the full show tends to be. Get the full show on any podcasting platform. I prefer to keep it audio only, so we have a more decentralized distribution for a controversial show, and also so I can edit out the ums and ahs and barking dogs and all the things that happen when a person records in their home environment. And then if you really like the show, you can sign up for THC Plus, and instead of 1 hour interviews, you get the full 2-hour interview for just $8. I think that's a better deal, more of a win-win than asking you to support the show by booking a therapy session or buying generic Viagra. It's getting weird out there, folks. So just go to the highersidechats.com or click the link at the top of any set of show notes, and all your wildest dreams will come true. All right? All right.
The Higherside Chat Show. Greg Carwood.